to move to Europe. And Merkel promised to fund at least 50% of what is needed in the region in the future. And I can confirm from my time in the region that this has been really delivered. On the other hand, we have a situation today where Syrian refugees now are stranded in Greek islands. We have overcrowded Greek camps. We have promises to take at least the sick kids out of these camps to Germany. And there is not much happening these days.
We're in the middle of this coronavirus crisis, so of course we've very much taken our eye off what's going on in Syria at the moment. Are people still trying to leave the country in the numbers they were 5 years ago?
Surely not, but this has a couple of reasons. One, it would be difficult to say, well, because we stopped this migration to Germany, this has ended, and this trigger for the people has ended. The key issue is that people can't leave the country from Syria anymore because borders are closed, and this could be a big disaster soon in northwest Syria, for example, in Idlib, because the Turkish border is closed as well. At the same time, in the region, we have many people who get very little support again these days, especially this year. Only 20% of the funds are coming which are needed to support Syrian refugees in the region, in their home region. Plus, we have the issue that many Syrians can't reach Europe anymore. They can neither reach Germany because there's no legal way to reach a German border as a refugee, nor can they cross the Mediterranean Sea because all sea rescue missions have stopped. Europe is letting people drown in the Mediterranean Sea or deporting them back to Libya, where they are tortured and beaten up or deported again. So this is a key challenge. People are not coming from Syria anymore, but not for very good reasons.
Well, thank you for outlining that. Ralf Sudhoff from the Centre for Humanitarian Action, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the first pandas to be born in Germany have celebrated their first birthdays at the Berlin Zoo. Pitt and Paula have become star attractions since they made their public debut in January. And they were rewarded with some special birthday treats, a frozen cake and a portion of snow. Although the pandas were born in Germany, they remain on loan from China, as do their parents. Do like a panda pic. Here's a reminder of our top story at this hour. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has condemned as shameful an attempt by demonstrators, including far-right activists, to storm the German parliament here in Berlin. Some protesters broke through police lines during a larger rally against the government's pandemic policies. This is DW News, live from Berlin. Ben Fazulin is up next with our COVID-19 special. I'll be back at the top of the hour. And of course, as always, more on the website. That's dw.com. Have a good day.
ABC presents a season of programs and stories exploring our environment and seeking solutions to the climate challenge. Your Planet on ABC TV, iView, radio and online. abc.net.au/yourplanet.
A setback in the battle against the coronavirus. Cases of reinfection are emerging in Hong Kong, the United States, and Europe. They suggest immunity from the disease does not necessarily last long. The World Health Organization is calling for more studies. Concrete answers are vital in developing a vaccine. That is, if we ever get one.
So much for herd immunity or full immunity. And what about natural immunity? So many questions, which we'll get to in a moment with an expert. First, the world's first genetically verified case of someone being reinfected with COVID-19 and what that could mean for the pandemic.
As the coronavirus pandemic took hold, scientists knew a vaccine would be the best protection against the virus. But there was still the hope that those recovering from infections would be immune, as is the case with viruses like smallpox or polio. When a 33-year-old man in Hong Kong tested positive for a second time, those hopes were ruined. Some people might ask, will you be immune to the virus forever after you recover? There wasn't a clear answer before, but now it's certain. After your first infection, there's always a chance you'll get infected again. In their research paper, the team at the University of Hong Kong says the second infection was a different strain of the virus and that the patient was asymptomatic. The study examines how often people who've had COVID-19 are immune to new infections and for how long. These questions have implications for vaccine development and decisions about returning to work, school and social activities. As many countries in Europe and around the world went into lockdown to slow the spread, Sweden went against the tide, opting not to confine its population. Schools and restaurants remained open, in the hope that infected people would become immune, thus allowing them to continue their lives as normal and ultimately slowing the spread of the virus.
I think Swedish people are taking big responsibilities. So if we are sick, we stay at home, and if we're not, we can be outside.
Sweden's infection rate and deaths per million were soon among the worst in Europe. And yet, testing showed the country still fell a long way short of the estimated 90% which would create herd immunity. Nor is the rest of the world anywhere close to that. The WHO says that until the world has readily available vaccines, the virus will continue to inflict significant changes on our lives.
Now, as a planet, as a global population, we are nowhere close to the levels of immunity required to stop this disease transmitting. And we need to focus on what we can actually do now to suppress transmission and not live in hope of herd immunity being our salvation. Right now, that is not a solution. And it's not a solution we should be looking to for our salvation.
And the immunity picture is looking increasingly complicated. In the southern German town of Bad Feilenbach, a study by Germany's Robert Koch Institute found that 40% of participants who had tested positive for the coronavirus before the study began no longer had immunoglobulin G antibodies, the most common type of antibody.
We know from other studies that a proportion of people proven to have been infected with SARS-CoV-2 show no antibodies after a certain amount of time. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have immunity to SARS-CoV-2.
The Robert Koch Institute is now conducting several regional studies and plans to start a country-wide antibody study at the end of September. As researchers toil to bring vaccines to the world, questions are looming about whether it's feasible to create a vaccine that would actually work for a lifetime.
Well, let's go over to Thomas Kamrat. He's director of the Institute for Immunology in Jena. Thomas, what are the chances of getting reinfected?
The chance seems to be real but slim. There are several case reports from different countries on people who have recovered from COVID-19 and then felt sick again. There's a series of 8 patients from China and single reports from Hong Kong and some European countries. So it seems to be possible.
But you're saying rare. What about other cases that haven't been uncovered and more studies that have to be done according to the World Health Organization? I mean, could this be the tip of the iceberg?
Probably not, because we know a little bit about the immunity against COVID-19 by now. People usually develop antibody responses which are protective. People usually develop responses by T cells which are protective. But we do know that in some people, these responses may be short-lived. So that would be a possibility to explain the fact that some people can become reinfected after well. But most people should have protective immunity for some time after their infection with COVID-19, with SARS-CoV-2.
But what about full immunity? I mean, does that exist when it comes to COVID-19?
What do you mean by full immunity? That once infected, you can never get infected again in your life? Is that what you mean by?
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
that's too early to say, because we only know this infection since a little bit more than half a year. So thus far, the vast majority of the symptomatic patients and the asymptomatic that have been investigated have not fallen sick again. But we do not know if the immunity against the virus will last for a year or for 2 years or for many years. Experience from other coronaviruses, including the SARS coronavirus, shows that the immune responses wane after some time. So for SARS, immune responses, antibody responses were no longer detectable after 6 years in most of the people. So we do not expect lifelong immunity after an episode of COVID-19, probably.
And the big question, what about developing vaccines or drugs to treat a COVID infection? Doesn't success depend on knowing exactly how immunity against the disease works?
Well, vaccines have often been developed quite empirically, and there's a lot of vaccines, promising vaccines in the pipeline. We do know a little on protective immunity. You're absolutely right. We need to know much more, but thus far it seems that the vaccines that have been tested are inducing the right responses. And probably or possibly we will have to be content with less than the normal success. So maybe a vaccine would not induce a lifelong immunity or not induce an immunity that lasts for 10 years or so. But even if it lasted for 2 or 3 years, I think it would be a great success. And even if it would just prevent the severe clinical courses, if it would switch a severe clinical course to a mild infection, I think that would be a huge success already, given the current situation.
So could it mean getting immunized, getting like a flu shot every year, basically?
We don't know if it would be every year or every other year or every 3 years or so, but that could be the case. It would be slightly different from flu, because flu, you need a new shot every year because the virus changes so rapidly. That does not seem to be the case with the coronavirus and with the SARS-CoV-2. If one would have to immunize more frequently, it would probably be because the immune response, the memory wanes against the virus, and therefore it needs to be refreshed. That's a possibility that needs to be explored.
Thomas Kamrat there from the Institute for Immunology in Jena. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
For a look at some other aspects concerning the coronavirus, it's over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams, with your questions.
We've heard about the underlying diseases and conditions that can influence the severity of COVID-19 outcomes. But does viral load also affect severity?
When I began looking into this, I quickly realized that there's still no clear answer to this question, partly because the amount of virus in a patient's body changes from day to day as the disease progresses. We know from other diseases that high viral loads are linked to infectiousness, but do they also affect disease severity in COVID-19? Well, the information coming out of the studies is kind of conflicting. A recent, fairly large-scale one, for example, found a clear link between mortality and high viral load in hospitalized patients, and even suggested it could be used as a tool for stratifying patient risk. But other studies that have measured viral loads in, for example, children who had very mild forms of the disease found they were generally carrying even more virus than adults who developed severe forms of the disease. And then there are the studies showing that asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic adults can also have very heavy viral loads. So after hours of reading, this is how I would interpret the data. Because kids and asymptomatic adults can have lots of SARS-CoV-2 in their bodies, but no symptoms, high viral loads don't seem to be a reliable indicator of disease severity until you land in the hospital with a severe case. At that point, it does become an indicator of outcome severity. What we still don't know is whether high viral load is actually causing the disease to get worse for those patients in the hospital, or if it's an effect. But at least in those who are hospitalized, the two are associated in some way.
Well, over 38,000 people turned out to protest against Germany's coronavirus measures on the weekend. There were multiple arrests after clashes with police. They say right-wing extremists co-opted the demonstration. Over 9,000 people have died from the virus in Germany. Still, protesters believe the danger is overblown.
Personally, I don't believe that there's a pandemic. I do think the disease exists, but not a pandemic. Well, according to the new definition of a pandemic, it's a pandemic. But that has to do with how much it's spread, and not with how dangerous it is.
Finally, medical staff are among those most at risk of getting the coronavirus, but a hospital in Mexico City has taken on a new employee with complete immunity to COVID-19. La Luchi Robotina goes from room to room, providing support to patients. With the robot's help, they can talk to relatives via video call or to the hospital psychologist. Feelings of isolation are a big problem for COVID sufferers, and this is where the robot comes in. I'm Ben Fazulin. See you next time.
Justice and humanity.
Economic growth.
Women have been great role models.
The city has been in lockdown.
Tuesdays, we're here to brighten up your night.
Like the warmth from the sun, and this will be our year. Took a long time to come.
We have to fight to save Planet A.
We'll take you on a delicious trip back in time.
I'm going to get on the source to quench my thirst for knowledge.
And I meet some amazing Australians.
Share your Tuesday nights with us on ABC.
Come along with me, won't you? Few sports stars have captivated Australia the way sprinter Cathy Freeman has.
Cathy Freeman.
Kathy Freeman.
Kathy Freeman.
Fans poured into the Olympic precinct from early this afternoon.
This is an Olympic finals night. Absolutely tasted in the air.
Cannot think of any other athlete that has been placed under so much pressure.
The burden of a nation willing and wanting. It's the burden of 4 years of basically being unbeaten.
That's a lot of weight to be carrying.
The event you're about to see, they're calling the race of our lives.
This is what I've been preparing for my whole life.
Everything changed that day.
She brought the place together.
I feel like I won the race. I felt like I ran the race.
Everybody was the winner.
Black and white Australia stood as one.
I still feel the power of it.
Absolutely magical.
It just feels like a dream.
Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. Welcome to the program. A Tasmanian man has done something remarkable. He's documented close to every edible plant in the world. That's more than 31,000 plants catalogued according to where, when and how to grow them. And as Landline's Margot Kelly found out, his work is being used to fight child starvation around the world.
In the port city of Burnie, on the northwest coast of Tasmania, a quiet achiever has become the world's leading expert on edible plants. And Bruce French has taken over an old church to display his life's work.
So here's a nice traditional church, isn't it?
Oh, wow. No, this is anything but traditional. This is quite something. Wow, every square metre's got something on it, Bruce.
Yes, lots of stuff.
For more than 5 decades, agricultural scientist Bruce French has been cataloguing edible plants. Fruit, vegetables, nuts, legumes, you name it, he's tracked it down, along with how, when and where to grow it.
So how many plants have you actually got now in this database?
31,170. So.
And constantly growing, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's almost every edible plant in every country in the world.
That's phenomenal. You're obsessed.
I am, yes.
Why did you actually get into this? This is quite a specific hobby to have.
I'm getting over my embarrassment from about 54 years ago. I went to teach in Papua New Guinea, and the student said, don't teach us Australian plants, we don't live in Australia. Don't teach us Australian methods, we don't have machines. Teach us our plants, methods for our country.
And then you had to learn those.
And I knew nothing about them, so I had to learn them, and then I've just kept going. What about the next country, the next country, the next country?
His Christian faith drives him to continue to address child malnutrition. Bruce shares the posters, books and guides he's created for free. His website has had well over 7,000 downloads from countries across the world.
So we've got a whole room full of plants out the back to show you some of these amazing plants that suit Tasmania. So.
Thank you. So this one I don't quite recognise, Bruce, but it's from your garden?
Yes, it's called Yacon, and it comes from the high Andes. It grows almost like a dahlia plant with little shoots around here and lovely big flowers, and then under the ground it has this big tuber.
Looks like a potato, that bit.
And the amazing part about it is it's lovely and sweet, so you can just peel it and eat it raw.
It's not just flavour Bruce cares about. He's focused on nutrition. And not all vegetables are created equal when it comes to essential vitamins and nutrients. Green leafy vegetables contain iron, but cassava leaves or amaranth are loaded with it compared to cabbage. And that's part of the message Bruce and his wife Deborah French have for communities they work with.
It's really getting them to look and learn what their local plants are, because often they are much more nutritious than introduced ones.
And it's quite surprising how much the countries you've visited, they've been wanting to grow Western foods when the more nutritious options have been there the whole time.
Yes, yes. And often it's because of colonialism, where, like in Africa, European countries came in and colonised countries in Africa, and so they brought in their own temperate vegetables. And so really I remember I heard a story about one Kenyan man who said, I know cabbage is not good for my children, it fills their stomach up and there's not much room for anything else, but it has prestige.
Has the prestige?
Yes,
yeah,
it has
right.
the prestige.
There's no shortage of nutritious vegetables being grown in these fertile soils. But Bruce's work has made me think of things a little bit differently. To me, dandelions have always been a weed, but apparently their leaves and roots are packed full of vitamin A, and they don't go too bad in a pot of tea.
I'm joining Carolyn Hingston for a cuppa. She's the project administrator with Food Plant Solutions, a not-for-profit organisation that uses Bruce's immense database as a basis for food programs across the world.
So we started with a focus on developing countries and you know, where malnutrition is rife, where you might see 50% of the children are stunted. And it quickly became apparent to me that we've got this massive issue in our own backyard, all across Australia.
In Tasmania, more than 70% of adults are overweight or obese, and nearly 1 in 3 children. But you can be overfed and still be malnourished. Carolyn says it comes down to a failure to eat 5 serves of veg a day.
Not just talk about potatoes and peas and all the vegetables that most of us know.
Which are all good for you?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
all good for... But talk about some that we're not so familiar with. So broaden the scope of vegetables and fruits that we're eating. Talking about dandelions, talking about oca and okra, things like that. Certainly the publication that we've got for Tasmania includes those foods that are less well known.
And in this time of lockdowns and coronavirus, people have been a bit more inspired to get dirt under their fingernails,
Absolutely.
grow their own food, and you're trying to tap into that market as well, provide information there?
Very much. So we've been creating and can create for any district a bulletin basically that explains key nutrients, how your body uses them, and then identifies plants that fit into the 5 main food groups, and then from that, how to grow them and how to use them and what the nutritional benefits are. So we've made them for, say, the Blue Mountains or for Goulburn here in Australia, but we've also made them for Finland, places in the US.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Pretty mild. That's not too bad.
No, it's mild.
All right, let's take our cups of tea and chat to Vietnam.
Sounds good.
A project partner in Vietnam is seeing benefits firsthand. AOG Vietnam works in the country's rural areas where around a quarter of children are malnourished.
We started with a little garden in a kindy, and in Vietnam, kindergartens have a kitchen attached, so they were not only learning the value of good quality crops and how to look after them without pesticides, but they could actually, benefit from eating them. And we've gone on to 16 gardens now.
The children are weighed and measured each year, and schools with the gardens are getting results.
Malnutrition rates are dropping, enrolments are going up, kids staying in school is going up, because before kids would only stay till lunchtime, like 10:30, 11, then go home, and most wouldn't come back after lunch.
Why is information from Tasmanian-based organisation actually helping Vietnamese communities know what to grow?
A lot of knowledge here in Vietnam is passed down generation to generation. So if generations and parents unaware of what's actually valuable, they can't pass that along. So when we go through, sit down with the teachers and principals, parents, with the guide, and go through, the amazing nutrition of, a certain plant, and their mind is blown that the root is actually more, valuable than this other thing. And then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know this was so nutritious. This grows, down the road, and we've never even thought of it before.
Agricultural engineer John McPhee helps turn the database of over 31,000 plants into easy-to-read guides.
Bruce has done all the hard yards in making it available in the database, but this is more about tailoring for specific circumstances or specific people's needs.
So, welcome to the garden.
Like tailoring it for Devonport Community House, which is planning a workshop at its thriving garden for community members. For John, it's satisfying to know his work is having an impact abroad and at home.
But just having a small part that I can actually do at home after hours, it doesn't involve having to travel around the world to do stuff. And it's just bringing this information together, making it available for other people in whatever form they want.
While Food Plant Solutions is focused on gardens, it has some serious broadacre ag credentials on its board.
So this is your old stomping ground in a way, Buzz?
It is, yeah. It brings back some fond memories of the earlier days.
Agronomist Buzz Green has created multiple successful agricultural companies in Tasmania that now employ hundreds of people.
It's a good place to get in from the rain, Buzz.
Absolutely.
He says farmers and agronomists produce fresh, safe, healthy food, but often don't consider the nutritional value.
You go and talk to Western-trained agronomists and say, here's a number of plants, can you rank them in terms of their concentration of different nutrients? Let's say zinc, for example. Which one would have the highest zinc and which one might have the lowest zinc, and where would they fit? Well, most of them wouldn't have any idea. In fact, I've put people to the test and no one has any idea.
After hearing Bruce French give a presentation on his database to a Rotary Club back in 2007, Buzz helped found the not-for-profit Food Plant Solutions to spread the message.
A very simple thing was to say what plants grow best in this location and what are the plants that are most appropriate for the nutritional needs of the people. A very simple approach. And I'd been involved in trying to grow crops in places where they weren't really suited to or meant to be. So the whole concept resonated very strongly with me.
What Bruce has done in the database is fantastic. I mean, there's just so much information in there from so many sources, and bringing that information together as he's done over his life has been a monumental task.
For his work, Bruce French was made an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2016. But his commitment, indeed obsession, is never going to end.
And how do you feel when you know you've changed something?
Oh, I'm delighted, yes. I'm not trying to make fame or fortune. I'm not interested in those. I'm interested in hungry kids not dying before they get to school.
Western Australia is facing a shortage of shearers and woolshed workers as contractors struggle to fill teams for the upcoming spring shearing season. Coronavirus movement restrictions and a lack of newcomers has left older shearers in demand. Albany-based reporter Mark Bennett has the story.
After half a century of shearing, Neville Schleicher can't put an exact figure on the number of sheep he's shorn.
Oh, he's shorn well over 1 million years. Confidently can say that without any hesitation. On a Bible.
He started on the boards when he was 19, determined to shear for 50 years. And now, at 70 years old, he's still averaging close to 160 sheep a day.
My secret is not very much. I don't do much, hardly any exercises.
Still flexible enough to touch his toes.
Yeah, I'm just one of the lucky people that, got a good back, never used a back aid, never shorn a sheep in a back aid.
Neville is one of his shed boss's most consistent and reliable shearers.
He's been shearing for 50 years now. He's just turned 70. He's quite unbelievable, really, for someone of his age to still be able to do this job, especially shearing, one of the hardest jobs probably going around, and for a man of his age to still be doing good numbers and still coming to work every day is quite remarkable, I think.
Australia's older shearers are in demand. Frank Garbellini still shears on small holdings and for hobby farmers.
I'd love to shear 3 sheep every day. It's sort of keep me supple, keep me flexible or something like that.
At 85, he hasn't lost his touch or his love for life as part of a team.
Shearing sheep fascinates me, I honestly believe that if my knees hadn't packed up, I would have been still full-time. If those joints had held out, I would still be involved in shearing, wool classing, and the whole team, just the team environment. Yeah.
20 years ago, shearers probably pulled up at 60, but today we're seeing well and truly a lot of shearers, a lot of wool handlers and wool classers into their 70s.
Finding young replacements is proving a challenge to the industry, compounded by the COVID-19 restrictions on seasonal wool workers coming from overseas. Shearing team managers are struggling to find enough workers. In WA alone, a survey identified a shortfall of 170 shearers and the same number of shed staff to harvest this year's spring and summer clip.
So this year's sort of thrown up a curveball for us with the COVID-19 in that the usual supply of New Zealand shearers and shed staff that come into WA and into Australia is not going to come this year, and so we're having to try and source our staff from in our own states and encourage people to come out and work in industry.
shearer training programs and the promise of work has drawn 22-year-old Oliver Thomas into a life in the shed.
Shearing was fun once I got into the industry. I really enjoyed it. And I guess my father did it, so I always wanted to do it just so that I could do it like he did. But yeah, that's mainly it. I just wanted to try something new, and I love it now. Yeah, it's good money and there's heaps of opportunities. It's quite hard work, and I don't think that appeals to a lot of people my age. But for the ones that do, I think they'll definitely find their way into the industry if they want to.
While he has plenty of seasonal work, the lack of continuous employment is a barrier for newcomers. From a high of 180 million sheep in the 1970s, Australia's flock numbers are now down to around 68 million, with 14.5 million here in WA. But as the climate continues to dry in the southern half of the state, more farmers are considering cutting back their sheep numbers and moving more of their land into cropping. And that translates to less work in the long term for shearing teams.
I think the biggest problem we have in the shearing industry is not the continuity of work. So you've got people dropping out all the time, and you learn a job, you just get a start, and then you've got 3 or 4 months off. Well, there's not too many jobs that people can hang around and find another job.
You know, we can bring these people in and get people to come into industry, but the continuity of work is the hardest thing. You know, if they go off to a mine or something like that, you know, they work 12 months a year and they don't have those lay periods. So that's something we just got to work with as an industry.
Despite the challenges of replacing an ageing workforce, a decline in sheep numbers and the volatile price of wool, there's optimism the wool industry will continue to play a vital role in Australian agriculture.
Those farmers that are very much like the sheep industry, and there's growers there that, you know, like a mixed balance, so they will stay. And those guys that are happy to run sheep and feel that the sheep are a part of their enterprise will stick with their sheep.
Despite the work available, Neville Schleicher plans to shear his last sheep by Christmas.
I think I'll give it away then. I think that's enough.
And then what, just go cocky shearing every sort?
Oh, well, if someone, is stuck for somebody, I'll go and give them a hand,
Maybe make that 1,000,001.
While supermarket chains have had their difficulties coping with the pandemic, some independent butchers say business has never been better. Customer service is their main appeal, and with more women entering the trade, the local butcher shop is as welcoming as ever. Landline's Helena Bachkowski reports.
The knife skills of a butcher are often envied, and until recently, butchering was thought of as a man's trade. But it's all changing. Husband and wife team Jed and Erin Marks lease the local butcher shop in the central western Queensland town of Longreach.
My mate Ryan Savage passed away and left the butcher shop to his wife Lisa. Basically from there, the Savage family had trust in me to run their shop.
Breaking a 5-generation tradition of Savage family running the shop wasn't the only change to this butchery. Erin is the first female butcher in Longreach, and she's one of a growing number of women entering the trade.
I remember reading an article somewhere that the first female apprentice in Australia was 1976. Now, to me, that was yesterday. It's really, really, really modern history. So, but we are seeing a lot more women enter the trade, which is a really good thing.
Even though she's married to the boss, Erin Marks hasn't been given any special treatment in her apprenticeship.
So you'll start from the bottom, which is a lot of cleaning, wiping down benches, literally start from the bottom and work your way up. Then you sort of move on to, you learn how to sharpen your knives, and then you sort of go on to mincing, sausage making, slicing, and then more into your processing of a carcass. and into individual cuts.
Along with the butcher's shop, the Marxes have also taken over the lease of the local abattoir, made available with the closure of the local agricultural college.
We've been chasing this place for a few years, and it sort of all just happened at the right time. I know it's not a good note, but the college shut down and it sort of opened up this opportunity for us to step in and take the slaughterhouse on. It was definitely a long-term goal for us, and we did look into it when we took the butcher shop on.
Does anyone ever ask to see Jed or one of the other guys over you?
All the time. It's Jed. At the butcher shop, I get it. He's been there the longest. He's worked with the Savages families for years, and I get that. But when it comes up here in a new industry, they still look at him, and that really bugs me. Really does. But we'll get there.
It's not just in rural Australia that women are interested in the trade. Brisbane has seen a surge in female apprentices and qualified butchers.
Lisa, what kind of animal is this one? These are goat.
Lisa Lyon has lived in Australia for the past decade.
So I did my thing in Canada, came over here to Australia and found out that it didn't count. Didn't count at all, no. So I got to come here and be an apprentice again, although it was accelerated because they just took into consideration what I'd already done, so, which was nice.
Becoming a butcher used to be a 4-year indentured apprenticeship. This has been slowly phased out to make way for a Certificate 3 in meat retail butchering. And it includes a lot of theory.
Obviously, the safe handling of food, food hygiene, the background of how animals are bred, how they're finished, what qualifies an animal's eating quality as far as intramuscular fat, fat coverage, all of those sorts of things, different breeds, working out your costing as far as your yield out of that carcass goes. So there's a lot of theory involved in the butchering trade as well.
Lisa, you have an $827.60 piece of Wagyu there. Yep. $200 a kilo, is it worth it? It's amazing. It's amazing. So you've tried it? Yes, yes. We have when we got to be able to sell it. So we have to be able to say, yes, I've tried it and it's absolutely amazing. Is that something that if someone walked in and went, I want that cut, but I don't want to spend the $827.60, can you slice me off a bit? Certainly. You definitely do that? Yep, definitely do that. Can you slice me off $5 of that? I'm only joking. I could try.
Look, when I first started in the industry 40 years ago, it was unheard of.
Store manager Danny Nielsen thinks the female employees help create a better culture.
I actually like them on the floor. They're a little bit more pedantic with their workmanship, their personalities. Here I'm lucky I've got some great women, as you've already spoken to Lisa. She's a 2IC. Kerry, she runs the production area for me. Young Kaylee, she looks after the online store, takes a lot of pressure off me there. And Pat, she looks after making all the sausages for me. You know, I can just let them run their own shows. They come and see me if there's any problem.
Being a butcher is a profession that I seriously considered, but when I was younger, there were no examples, so it just didn't seem like a viable option. That's changed due to people like Erin Marks and Lisa Lyon, who are showing young women that it's possible. G'day, Tegan. Hello, how are you? I'm well.
Tegan Noon Trelaw is part of a small team. She has worked in the store for 7 years, starting out on the tills. It was a shock to her friends that she chose this line of profession.
I honestly didn't think I would ever do this in my life. Like, as you can see, I'm into beauty and makeup, so I started like that first. I did hairdressing, didn't like that. I started a beauty therapy course, I didn't like that. And then I was just working here for a little bit on the tills, and then I got more interested. Like my dad worked in a butcher, and then his dad, and then my granddad's dad as well, so it's like 4 generations.
Lisa Lyon proved to be the role model that gave Tegan the push she needed.
I spoke to Lisa a few times about it and she kind of encouraged me into it. Within the first month I was an apprentice, I was over there and we were breaking down beef carcasses, so that was exciting. We've kind of stuck together because we were the 2 girls.
There is a global push to get more women interested in all aspects of the meat industry. In 2015, Laura Ryan from England began a networking group called Meat Businesswomen. It came to Australia 4 years later with much success. The Australian Meat Industry Employees Union are encouraged by the number of women wanting to become butchers.
Probably 50% of our membership are females. So there's a large group of women that work in processing plants, but we are seeing more and more go into retail butchering.
And are keen to help where they can.
If you're thinking about being a butcher, just do it. Just go and apply for an apprenticeship. If you're having difficulties finding an apprenticeship, give us a call and we can certainly steer you in the right direction.
Erin, what's your favourite part of the job?
Favourite part? I don't mind serving customers, especially through the tourist season. You get some interesting ones. And I like breaking down. Jed teach me how to break down a bit more would be good. But no, that's probably my favourite part.
Best way to cook Wagyu, low and slow. Are you doing it on the barbecue or in the oven?
For veteran butcher Lisa Lyon, it also comes down to the customers.
I guess first and foremost is caring for people. You know, taking care of people, making sure they're well fed and happy. It'll be absolutely beautiful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and good price too. It's on special.
What do your kids think of you being a butcher?
Oh, they're so proud of me. My son thinks it's so great. He has pictures of me on doing certain different things on different jobs, and there's pictures of me, and that's one of the first things. Oh, my mom, here, look, this is my mom.
And that's the show for today. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, our main program is on Sunday at 12:30. From all the team at Landline, bye for now.
Somewhere, deep in space, is a planet similar to our own. Yet oh so different.
I can't help wondering why Trump is so concerned about TikTok.
President Trump believes in you. Join Chaz and John as they transmit their fascinating discoveries.
And you can't escape the politics of this pandemic.
And hunt for intelligent life.
Never a dull moment.
On Planet America, Wednesday 9:30 on ABC and iView.
All my family is saying, what is it like to be out there? I say it's not easy.
Danzel Baker's incredible journey from Arnhem Land to the world stage.
I dreamed of doing this and I'm doing it.
Kurt Fernley's 1+1, Thursday 9:30.
We'll be here to care for you.
A high-profile Australian TV anchor at a Chinese state broadcaster detained in Beijing.
The road out of lockdown, Victoria's traffic light plan to reopen closed businesses.
Gladys Berejiklian expected to announce permit changes during a visit to the New South Wales-Victoria border.
Australia's spy boss warns not all Australians are the good guys as she defends surveillance of citizens.
Come on in, home sweet home. Good to be home again. I'll put the kettle on. You got time for a cup of tea?
And we get the grand tour of a very unusual house in southern Queensland, a piece of Australian history turned into a family home.
And a very good morning to you. It is Tuesday, the 1st of September. I'm Michael Rowland.
And I'm Lisa Miller. You're watching News Breakfast.
Well, an Australian journalist working in China has been detained by the Chinese government in a highly sensitive case posing a fresh challenge to Australia-China relations. Cheng Lei is an anchor for the Chinese government's English language TV network, CGTN. Friends and family have been unable to contact her for weeks now, and the Foreign Affairs Department has confirmed she is being detained in Beijing.
Australian diplomats were able to speak to her via video link a few days ago. Cheng Lei hasn't been formally arrested or charged, and she could be kept for up to 6 months without access to lawyers. It provides another pressure point in the deteriorating relationship between Australia and China. Let's go straight to Parliament for the latest, and political reporter Noor Haider joins me from there. Noor, what do we know about Cheng Lei's detention?
Good morning, Lisa. Well, we don't know why Cheng Lei has been detained in China. She had been working as an anchor and reporter, a business anchor and reporter for the Chinese government English news channel CGTB and was detained several weeks ago. Now, we learnt of her case when the Foreign Minister Marise Payne issued a statement late last night. Now, Marise Payne revealed that the government had received formal notification of Cheng Lei's detention on the 14th of August. And the Foreign Minister says that Australian officials had an initial consular visit via video link back on the 27th of August with Cheng Lei, and the government says it will continue to provide support to her family. Now, our Beijing correspondent Bill Birtles has been looking into this from his end in China, and he says that Ms. Cheng has not yet been charged. However, she is being held under what's being called, or what's described as, residential surveillance and at a designated location. That essentially means Ms. Cheng can be detained without any formal arrest for up to 6 months while she is investigated. Now, her family here in Australia, she has 2 young children who are living with family in Melbourne. They've issued a statement saying that they are aware of her current situation and that they have been in contact with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and that they are hopeful that due process will be observed and that they look forward to this matter being resolved satisfactorily. Now, we know that there have been previous arrests of Australians in China, including an Australian writer, Yang Henjung, who was detained earlier in 2019.
Nor did the Australian government have any sense this was coming?
Well, Lisa, you could potentially say so, because it was only in July this year that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade issued updated advice for Australians in China or those considering travelling to China that they could be at an increased risk of arbitrary detention. Now, relations between Beijing and Canberra have been strained for some months now, sort of starting with the Australian government's push for an inquiry into the coronavirus, and we have seen over recent months an increased tensions, trade tensions in particular. We've seen sanctions being slapped on beef and barley produce coming out of Australia, and more recently investigations into wine produce. So you could potentially say that the government had expected something like this to happen.
All right, Nor, we'll check back in with you a little bit later. No doubt there will be developments through the morning. Thank you. And we'll be speaking to our China correspondent a little later in the program, as well as the Trade and Tourism Minister, Simon Birmingham, about this development. In other news, Victorians will learn on Sunday details of a plan to ease COVID-19 restrictions following the 6-week Stage 4 lockdown. Premier Daniel Andrews says a reopening roadmap will cover industries forced to close during the lockdown, including cafes, restaurants and retailers. A traffic light system denoting varying levels of restrictions will be introduced according to risk. State Parliament will sit again today, with Upper House MPs expected to vote on an extension of the state of emergency powers.
Gladys Berejiklian will visit Albury on the New South Wales-Victorian border today, announcing details of a so-called border bubble. The ABC understands the Premier will announce a single border region will be reinstated on Friday, extending 50 kilometres either side of the state boundary. At the moment, Victorian border residents with permits to enter New South Wales must stay within a 2.5 kilometre zone. New resident permits will also come into effect from Friday.
Australia's Foreign Cyber Intelligence Agency will today defend its right to spy on Australians engaging in terrorism or espionage. In a rare speech, the head of the Australian Signals Directorate, Rachel Noble, will offer a detailed history of the organisation and defend its need for secrecy. She'll warn that Australia is facing challenging circumstances and a near impossible task of defeating terrorism and espionage. She says there are strict protections and restrictions in place if the agency wants to spy on Australians rather than foreigners.
The relatives of those killed when Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down over Ukraine in 2014 are seeking damages from 4 men standing trial in the Netherlands. So far, 316 family members have confirmed they're seeking unspecified financial damages from 3 Russians and a Ukrainian who are all still at large. 298 people died, including 38 Australians, when the Malaysia Airlines plane was shot down by a Russian surface-to-air missile.
Coronavirus and calls for racial justice have taken centre stage at MTV's socially distanced Video Music Awards. The first major awards ceremony of the pandemic has been held without an audience and with most performances pre-recorded. Canadian artist The Weeknd took out the top prize for Video of the Year, dedicating his award to police shooting victims Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor. But Lady Gaga dominated the awards with 4 VMAs, a show-stopping performance and multiple costume changes with custom-designed masks to match.
Stay safe, speak your mind, and I might sound like a broken record, but wear a mask. It's a sign of respect.
OK, let's take a quick look at the markets. Our futures pointing down after a slight fall on Wall Street. The Aussie dollar just under 74 US cents. Tapis crude trading at a smidgen over 49 US dollars a barrel, and gold this morning is picking up 1,970 US dollars an ounce.
OK, in sport, Australia has tasted early success in the Tour de France, with Caleb Ewan winning stage 3 in a thrilling finish. The 26-year-old New South Welshman blitzed the peloton as the famous race wound its way from Nice to Cicerone. Frenchman Julien Alaphilippe remains in the yellow jersey.
Let's spring to the weather, shall we? Hello, Nate.
It's day one. I'm hoping this year I don't get any complaints that spring doesn't start until later in the month. I do want people...
You've just guaranteed you're going to...
I know I have. I know. I'm looking for pictures of people's spring wherever you are in Australia. We've got some very serious weather to talk about today because there's catastrophic fire danger on the forecast for large parts of southeastern WA. We've got fire bans in force right through the region as hot, gusty northerly winds are driven ahead of a cold front right into the southeast of that state. Now, Perth's behind the cold front, so looking at some showers there, a top of 16. And that heat is coming from the north. You're feeling it up in Darwin, 35 degrees with a sunny day there. And ahead of the front, it's really warming up. Adelaide's already feeling that, 20 on the way. Brisbane, you've got a fine 25, and we've got a chilly one through much of the southeast with frost this morning. Sydney, you don't have any of that. A partly cloudy 18 to come. Canberra certainly feeling cold, 14 on the way, a bit of fog around. Melbourne, some patchy frost and fog to start. 15 will be the top, and Hobart's got a partly cloudy 14. Michael, Lisa, a dangerous start to spring in the south of WA. I'll have updates for you through the morning.
Thank you very much, Nate. Happy spring, Lisa.
Good morning,
Here
Michael.
We go. It's always a great time of the year. Optimism, the weather improves, and hopefully we're getting to the other side of this dreadful pandemic. So more on that as the show goes on. Also, a bit later on, Annabelle Crabb joins us to talk about her new show.
Going further back in time. Well, Back in Time for Dinner was such a roaring success. They've now gone further back in time, but I've got to warn you, if you're a vegetarian, you may want to cast your eyes elsewhere because there are some doozies that are needed to be prepared for dinner for this mob. I mean, I was a little bit squirmy myself, actually, but what a great insight into how everyone had to live and survive in the early 1900s. Annabelle will take us through it.
Let's get more now on the road ahead for coronavirus restrictions in Victoria and New South Wales. For more, we're joined by reporter Steph Ferrier. She's in Melbourne. Antoinette Collins is in Sydney for us. Good morning to both of you. Steph, starting with you this morning, what are we expecting to see on Sunday in Daniel Andrews' roadmap?
Hi, Michael. Yes, the Premier's flagged a traffic light style system of controls for coming out of this lockdown. And while I'm sure Victorians would love to see green lights all the way, Daniel Andrews has said we will be moving through different phases. Now, as you say, he has refused to release this roadmap until Sunday, saying another week of data is crucial to being able to set out a definitive plan. And he also wants to consult with businesses, unions and community groups as well. This blueprint will cover all those industries that were forced to close down during these lockdowns, and they'll have to abide by strict infection controls, including obviously washing hands, but the use of PPE for high-risk industries, as well as potentially density limits for areas like retailers and personal care providers. Cafes, restaurants and bars might also have to include outdoor service as well. Now, for people who work from home, that is going to remain, and for those who have to come into work, using face masks will remain compulsory. There's also the possibility of so-called workplace bubbles, where staff are split into teams to limit the number of people that they're in prolonged contact with. The Premier also says for these school holidays, sadly, it's unlikely that regional travel is off the cards to prevent the spread of infection. Also unlikely is a return to large gatherings at home, and you'll remember that that was one of the factors that sparked this deadly wave. As well, the Premier can't rule out the possibility that these tough lockdowns might continue beyond the next 2 weeks. Now, he says that any decisions will be driven by the data, and at least that data was good news yesterday in terms of the new cases. We dropped to just 73, which was the lowest since July. The number of active cases was also down to 2,620, but there were another 41 deaths, although 33 of those were more historical cases over the past several weeks in nursing homes that were just included in the data yesterday. Now, of course, one of the important things of this new blueprint is having the power to enforce it, and MPs will return to Parliament today to vote on the extension of those state of emergency powers. We've heard from the unions representing doctors, nurses and paramedics joining the police union, calling for these crossbenchers to support these changes and support a compromise 6-month extension after those crossbenchers in the upper house rejected Daniel Andrews' plan for a further 12 months.
Stephanie, thank you. Antoinette Collins, there's some relief on the way for communities on the New South Wales-Victorian border.
Yes, the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, will be bringing some welcome news for those residents on the border when she arrives in Albury later this morning. Basically, they'll be announcing the reinstatement of a 50-kilometre border zone. At the moment, it's currently connects to 2.5 kilometres, which has made life very difficult for those residents over the past 8 weeks as they've had to navigate education and health services trying to get across that border. What will also be introduced from Friday, when that border zone is reinstated, is a special permit to really give residents and businesses more freedom to be able to go about their daily lives. Now, for 8 weeks, it's been down to 2.5 kilometres. Prior to that, there was a 50-kilometre zone, but some towns along the border region were cut out of that particular zone. So we'll wait to see further announcements about who will be incorporated into this zone. But this comes after a week when the Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, has been in Albury talking to businesses and residents down there about the difficulties that they faced. And he's actually calling on National Cabinet when they meet on Friday to introduce special permits and allowances for agricultural workers to be able to navigate across national borders, saying that we could miss out on a bumper harvest season if they're not considered essential workers in the same sort of classification as freight workers, for example. So that's something that the New South Wales government will be pushing at National Cabinet on Friday. But of course, some welcome news for those residents along the border.
And just before we go, Antoinette, tell us about the latest cases in New South Wales.
Well, yes, early fears that this CBD cluster that's been taking hold was going to sort of blow out across the city seem to have not materialised at this stage. There were some very positive signs yesterday. There were 10 new cases of COVID-19 in New South Wales. 6 of those were in hotel quarantine, so only an extra 4 connected to that CBD cluster, taking that total to 34. And it means that potentially a ban on visiting aged care facilities for 2 weeks, which was going to include Father's Day on Sunday, potentially could be lifted if those numbers still stay low across the rest of the week. Now, yesterday, as we mentioned, there were 2 positive cases connected to a CBD bus. CCTV footage of that particular bus is being examined by health authorities to try and determine how transmission occurred, but the government is still refusing to make the wearing of masks mandatory on public transport, with the Premier saying that data collected by Service New South Wales is indicating that around 60% of passengers are already using masks, so that there's no real need to make it mandatory at this stage.
Antoinette, Stephanie, thank you both.
In the US, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has slammed President Donald Trump, accusing him of fanning the flames of violence and racial division to further his re-election chances. For more, Chief Foreign Correspondent Phil William joins us now from Washington. Good morning, Phil. Joe Biden wanted to concentrate on coronavirus, so why has he come out talking about violence?
Yes, he really did, and the reason he's had to do that is that President Trump has concentrated on violence, and he said, look at these Democrat-run cities like Portland, these sorts of cities which have nightly protests, some of which are violent. That's what the whole country will be like. It'll descend into a dark anarchy. And although the Democrats have largely ignored it and said it's rubbish, it's really started to bite. It's started to take a hold in some people's minds, and I guess they felt they had to come out and counter that and say, look, this violence, if you don't like it, it's actually happening on your watch, Donald Trump, and this is the sort of thing that we will control. We will negotiate out of this. We will not have this kind of divisive approach to society, and you're using this for your electoral advantage, trying to get something to beat us with. Here's a little of what Joe Biden had to say.
Fires are burning, and we have a president who fans the flames rather than fighting the flames. But we must not burn. We have to build. This president, long ago, forfeited any moral leadership in this country. He can't stop the violence because for years he's fomented it.
Joe Biden there. Well, President Trump is heading to Kenosha tomorrow. Gee, that's going to be quite an appearance.
Yes, it is. It'll be very controversial. This is the small city in Wisconsin where Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back. A black man shot by a white policeman sparked some protests. 2 protesters were shot dead, another injured. So it's really been quite a mess there. Donald Trump has decided this is the right time to insert himself there to, as he puts it, give comfort to those in that city. I'm not sure that everyone will see it that way, especially as he's taking a fairly partisan approach to it by going and visiting. He's going to be visiting the police. He's going to be talking to business owners and those that have suffered damage in those riots. There were riots, obviously. There were very serious riots there for a little while. But he's not going to go and see the Blake family, and he's still yet to comment on the Blake family. So it's not going to be probably a healing exercise, but it's exactly, according to Joe Biden, an example of him trying to exploit a situation rather than trying to calm it.
All right, thanks, Phil.
Let's bring you back home now, and catastrophic fire danger is forecast yet again for parts of Western Australia today, and decreasing winter is pointing to a difficult bushfire season in the southwest.
At the same time, firefighters could be under greater pressure because of heavy rain in the north of the state.
The seasonal outlook for the next 3 months shows only small parts of the Kimberley are identified as being at an elevated fire danger risk in the next 3 months. That's primarily due to significant rainfall that fell with cyclones Damien, Blake and Esther during the last cyclone season. This has resulted in elevated soil moisture readings and also meant that the fuels haven't dried out as fast as they normally would. That's going to cause a delay to the onset of the bushfire season in the north and can present some issues for us as the southern bushfire season reaches us in early November. So there is that potential that the northern bushfire season and the southern bushfire season could overlap in the next 4 to 5 months. We've seen a deficit of rainfall over the last couple of years. somewhat offset by some significant rain during August on the south coast, but it does point to a difficult bushfire season ahead.
OK, let's go to the morning's headlines from all the major news outlets right around the country. Kicking off with The Guardian, Australia. It is leading this morning with the White House refusing to say whether Donald Trump condemns that Kenosha shooting suspect.
On the front of The Age, workplaces will have to overhaul safety procedures to earn a green light as stage 4 restrictions are eased.
The Financial Review reports the Prime Minister is calling for the states and territories to recommit to a national plan to reopen their borders and their economies.
State of collapse. The Sydney Morning Herald says the Australian economy could shrink to where it was 4 years ago.
The Courier Mail is launching a campaign to kickstart Queensland's economy, saying big business has united in favour of tax cuts and major transport and building programs.
ABC News Online reports on the detention in Beijing of high-profile Australian news anchor Chang Lei.
The Australian covers the first major speech by the new boss of the spy agency, the Australian Signals Directorate, who says the threat to our way of life has never been more real.
The Herald Sun reveals AFL great Danny Frawley suffered from a crippling neurological disease linked to repeated head knocks.
In the West Australian, the State Parliamentary Committee has been told a ruling class controls football in that state.
The Mercury has an interview with a man who's been left traumatised by the number of road crashes on his doorstep.
Australia's richest fishing competition, the $1 Million Fish, opens for registration today. That story leads the NT News.
Speaking of major events, the Advertiser features some of the local performers ready to register their acts for the 2021 Adelaide Fringe Festival.
And the Daily Telegraph says the British Museum has been accused of hypocrisy for refusing to return Aboriginal artefacts.
Now, what did you think of Lady Gaga's mask?
It's a good gas mask. If for all of a sudden there was an emergency at the VMA Awards, she'd be fine. She'd be covered. The one she wore on the podium was
I love
gas
the way,
mask, yes.
like every costume, there was a different mask. I mean, that's a lot of effort that's gone into it. That's pretty impressive. We've seen a lot of people getting a little creative with their masks.
Yes, well, I mean, masks, quite frankly, are going to be a way of life for all of us for some time. Certainly it's mandatory in Victoria, maybe getting to that point, maybe in places like Sydney and parts of Queensland. We like the way some of our politicians are dealing with masks. Heading to Canberra, there's Bob Katter. What's he got on his mask, Lisa?
He's got a crocodile. Can't you see the teeth?
Oh, right.
Never smile at a crocodile, Michael. Now, the Prime Minister had the trouble a lot of us have had, which is foggy glasses. We've got some tips for him, though, to fix that.
And Anthony Albanese has his Rabbitohs mask, Go the Bunnies. Yeah. Ideas from you, if you have to wear a mask, certainly in Melbourne, or if you're just choosing to wear a mask following the strong recommendations of health officials elsewhere, love to hear from you. Send pictures, if possible, of your mask. Colourful the better on the first day of spring. Email, Facebook and Twitter. Good morning to you, PK.
Good morning, and I know that Michael and Lisa, that's probably ice hockey has led the way with masks because it's been a long tradition. They call it hockey in America and Canada, but yes, they've always had the colourful masks. Perhaps they're way ahead of everyone else, but I'll try and dig up one for you this morning. Nothing too colourful. I've been going with the black number and the Collingwood one after recent victories.
As you should.
So, we'll see how we go. We've got a special guest this morning, nice and early on the program. Lisa Alexander, the former coach of the Australian netball team, has been able to join us this morning to give us an update on the Super Netball season so far and talk about her replacement. Lisa Alexander, welcome to News Breakfast.
Good morning, Paul. I see you've got your beautiful library organised again.
I have, yes. I got a book about twitching, bird watching, but that's for another time. Lisa, Stacey Marikovic has been appointed the Australian coach over the weekend, and then straight away her team had a record-breaking win as well, so it's a good weekend for her. What do you make of your replacement?
Look, I'm very chuffed, actually, for Stacey. I know her well and have worked with her, actually, since she was assistant coach to Norma Plummer with the West Coast Fever. and also in her time as the head coach. And we've worked very closely together because she's been our Fast Five coach, and she's also been our Australian development coach and specialist coaches. So she's been fully immersed really in the national program pretty much the whole time. So we've got fantastic coaches, as I've already stated, and you know, it was a very difficult choice obviously for the selection panel. But, you know, I've said on Twitter, go Stace. I know she's getting a little bit of negativity from certain parts of that Twitter sphere, but from my perspective, it's we all need to get behind Stacey now and to assist her to do what is a very difficult job. It doesn't matter whether you're coaching cricket, which Justin Langer is now, or the hockey team. Actually, there's four national coaches over in Western Australia now. So that's a big deal for Western Australia.
Yeah, and really the only negativity has been some people are saying, well, she didn't play at the top level, which that's an old argument, and I'm not sure that applies anymore. Let's talk about Super Netball, Lisa. The Vixens knocking off the Swifts over the weekend, and I hear Joe Weston was saying that those Vics are enjoying the Queensland weather. They're actually liking being away from home, and it shows. They're on top of the ladder. What do you make of the form of those couple of top teams?
Yeah, look, they're both very disciplined, skillful teams, very, very well coached by Simone McInnes and Bryony Akel. It's the traditional rivals, actually, in Australian netball between New South Wales and Victoria. They play many, many finals in national championships. So for the Sargent McInnes Cup, it still hasn't been decided yet, but they certainly will be the two teams. They're the two teams I've actually predicted or tipped at the start of the year would play off in the grand final.
Well, I think the fast nature of the competition, 2 games a week, it seems to be sorting those teams out because the Giants, Thunderbirds, Firebirds and Magpies down the bottom, I'm not even sure that they can bridge that gap. Is that how you see the season passing by very quickly?
Yeah, look, certainly the New South Wales Swifts and the Melbourne Vixens both have the best benches in the whole competition. So it's no surprise they're also leading the stat and leading the ladder and coping with this congested environment as well. It's going to be a matter of those next group of teams being able to eke out those wins to get them in the Final Four and to also manage their players very well. I think Queensland Firebirds are definitely coming through as the dark horse in this competition because they're starting to get some belief in the team.
Okay, we'll watch for those as in the second half of the season. Come back and have a chat soon, Lisa, and we'll be talking about the run-up to finals. This is the fastest season I've ever seen.
Yes, it's been very good. Lots of sacrifices made from lots of people, support staff, everybody. And it's a credit to them. And, you know, the netball lovers are loving watching it.
Yeah, great. Well said. Thanks, Lisa. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Michael and Lisa, back to you. There's your netball wrap. And yes, a lot being said about the football coast and the sacrifices made, but these netballers, 2 games a week. Try that socially, let alone at the top level with these world-class athletes.
Pretty full on, PK. Thank you. Always great to hear from Lisa Alexander as well. Let's check your weather. Nate, how's it looking?
Taking to the last sunset for winter, Michael and Lisa. Wreck Bay, gorgeous. Shannon sent this one to the Weather Obsessed Facebook group. And why not for the south of New South Wales? The canola is looking great. Thanks, Tim, for this photo. It's not all fun for the start of spring, though. A front moving through the southwest is drawing hot, gusty northerly winds into southeastern WA today, and that's helping to ramp up the fire danger. Catastrophic conditions on the way for the Eucla and the southern interior of the state. Today we've got total fire bans in force throughout the region. Now that front is bringing a little bit of wet weather to the southwest, but the rest of the country is largely dry underneath a high. Frosty in the southeast, though there is a touch of shower activity just near the southeast coast of Queensland and for the northeast as well for the tropics. But otherwise it's clear skies, 25 on the way for Brisbane. In New South Wales you'll see some of those falls getting into the north coast, and we've got a frosty start through the inland. 18 on the way for Sydney, Canberra starting with a bit of fog, 14 later. We've got a frosty start in Victoria. A fine day though, some warmth starting to return, 15 on the way for Melbourne. And there's some light shower activity for Western Tasmania, extending into the north this afternoon. Hobart, you're staying fine, it's getting to 14. It's a hot day for Western South Australia, dust storms ahead of some late showers. Otherwise it's clear with a frosty start on and east of the ranges. Adelaide's aiming for 20 later, and in WA we'll see gusty showers extending through the south. Dust storms ahead of that change in the southeast and squally thunderstorms with maybe some small hail for the southwest corner. Perth, you've got showers. It's getting to 16. And up top, it's still very hot, fresh and gusty winds. We've got a chance of a shower for the northeast Territory coast, but Darwin staying dry. It's getting to 35.
Thank you, Nate. Plenty coming up on breakfast this morning, including these toddler Tassie devils. A little later, we'll take a look behind the scenes at a Tasmanian wildlife sanctuary and meet a few of the newest arrivals with a special guest appearance from Lenny, the baby wombat. How cute. That's all coming up. But first, here's Lisa with all of your latest news.
Thanks, Michael. An Australian journalist working in China has been detained by the Chinese government in a highly sensitive case, posing a fresh challenge to Australia-China relations. Cheng Lei is an anchor for the Chinese government's English language TV network, CGTN. Friends and family have been unable to contact her for weeks, and the Foreign Affairs Department has now confirmed that she's been detained in Beijing. Victorians will learn on Sunday details of a plan to ease COVID-19 restrictions following the 6-week Stage 4 lockdown. Premier Daniel Andrews says a reopening roadmap will cover industries forced to close during the lockdown, including cafes, restaurants and retailers. State Parliament will sit again today, with Upper House MPs expected to vote on an extension of the state of emergency powers. Gladys Berejiklian will visit Albury on the New South Wales-Victoria border today, announcing details of a border bubble. The ABC understands the Premier will announce a single border region will be reinstated on Friday, extending 50 kilometres either side of the state boundary. Australia's Foreign Cyber Intelligence Agency will today defend its right to spy on Australians engaging in terrorism or espionage. In a rare speech, the head of the Australian Signals Directorate, Rachel Noble, will offer a detailed history of the organisation and defend its need for secrecy. She'll warn that Australia is facing a near impossible task of defeating terrorism and espionage.
Thank you, Lisa. Returning now to the Australian TV anchor who has been detained in Beijing, our China correspondent Bill Birtles filed this report.
Australian diplomats, friends and family are rallying to support Cheng Lei, who is a very prominent figure in the Chinese government's English language media. For the past 8 years, she has been an anchor and a business reporter on the state TV network CGTN. Now, friends and family are not speculating on the reasons why she was detained around 3 weeks ago. There are many unknowns in this case, but she is being held under what's called residential surveillance at a designated location. Don't let the name fool you. It is not home detention. It basically is prison, and in previous cases, investigators have used it to detain and question suspects for up to 6 months, sometimes without granting them access to lawyers. At this point, I understand that legal representation is still being organised for Cheng Lei. She is very well known here in the Australian community. She has been involved in emceeing events for business associations and even the embassy. So she certainly has a lot of supporters here in Beijing. She also is a mother of 2 young children. They are in Melbourne with family members. Her family does not want to speak publicly, but they have issued a statement. Part of what they say is due process in China will be observed, and we look forward to a satisfactory and timely conclusion to the matter. So clearly a highly sensitive case. Many people will focus on the fact that she's Australian, but it is very unusual for the Chinese government to detain its own state media presenters. And either way, this poses yet another challenge to Australia in its increasingly tricky relationship with China.
Bill Birtle there, and we'll be following that throughout the morning, so stay with us. Now to a developing story from Queensland. Multiple fires have broken out at a prison in Western Brisbane.
The facility is in Stage 4 lockdown because of a coronavirus cluster. For more, let's go live to our Queensland reporter Michael Rennie. Michael, good morning. So what do we know so far?
Yeah, morning, Michael. Well, we do know that 5 fire crews were called out to the Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre just after 9 o'clock last night to put out what's been described as a rubbish fire. It was outside of the prison, and that follows a fire earlier in the day at the prison where 3 fire crews were called to. That started inside the prison. They said it was inside a cell. It was a mattress that was set ablaze. The ambulance service says that they have treated people but won't say, or prisoners inside the prison but won't say how many they've actually treated for that. So, yeah, and reports of multiple fires at the prison throughout the day. Now, it is in stage 4 lockdown at the moment, so that means that the prisoners are restricted to where they can move. All non-essential movement is suspended at the prison at the moment, and it's pretty tough conditions for them. They also have to wear face masks while they're moving around the prison. There's around about 9,000 prisoners in Queensland at the moment, Michael, that are currently going through this stage 4 lockdown.
OK, we'll stay across that story, still a very much developing one. Michael Rennie, thank you.
We've been hearing a lot recently from stranded Australians around the world who just can't get home. Some are also trying to bring vulnerable family members with them.
Yaj Shwadka and his brother are stuck in Mumbai at the moment after they travelled to India after their father died. They now find themselves torn between 2 countries dealing with the pandemic in very different ways and struggling to get home to Australia with their grieving mother.
I was able to quarantine at home directly from the airport, or else the rest of the crowd was going into hotel quarantine for a week or so, which helped us a lot so that we could support mum as well over here, and she's the only member left for us, so to say. That's the main reason we are here, and we're stuck now. If we try to transit through different countries, let's say via Doha or Emirates or even Singapore, we as Australian citizens aren't allowed to transit through those countries because we are coming from India. So there is no assistance in any way, shape or form that we can see. My brother was on a call with his wife and kids, and I was doing some work around, and she was inside in one of the rooms sitting on the computer doing some work. And all of a sudden, I just hear her crying out of nowhere for no reason. So it's like we can't just leave her alone. So we're just asking for an exemption on compassionate grounds. Just she has already got a visitor visa valid till October 2021. We just need on compassionate grounds just to bring her in so that we can support her during this time. She has a mum, she has been supporting us all these years. And when she needs us, we can't. Like, this is the time she needs us. And is my case not compassionate enough? There are real people who have that compassion and need that compassion right now. If not right now, then when?
Good question. Yaj Shwadka there in Mumbai. Now, many of us, especially in Victoria, are looking forward to a time when we can leave home for extended periods, but not everyone is going to be happy about that. Overseas experience shows that pets are likely to have serious separation anxiety.
Experts say it's important to set up a routine that eases pets back into normal life. Girish Sawalani reports.
The owners of 8-month-old Luna are trying to ease her into what life will be like post-pandemic.
So yeah, one of the issues we have now is when going out, she does bark when left. Pre-lockdown, that wasn't an issue.
She only joined the family 3 weeks before lockdown and is used to having people around the house all the time.
She's like my shadow. I'm working from home, she's laying beside me the whole day.
Heather believes Luna suffers from separation anxiety, defined by experts as a pet's distress caused by the absence of the owner. Signs may include chewing on doors, excessive howling, or pacing. And since the pandemic, others have also been dealing with similar issues.
He's so used to being with other dogs, I think he was missing all the other dogs, the socialisation, even though he was being exercised.
Research by the Dogs Trust in the UK has found that many pets are currently showing behavioural problems and are confused by their owners' changing behaviour. Successfully transitioning back to life before lockdown will take effort.
try not to make such a big fuss when you do leave. If you have spare time throughout your day, or if there's days when you're at home, you can practice like a leaving regime. So you pick up the keys, put them down again, and reward the dog for being calm.
Girish Saulani, ABC News.
Picking up the keys, practicing departure.
So many dogs and so many people have, for all the right reasons, bought pets, dogs in particular, over the pandemic. As we slowly, and it's going to be a slow process, transition back to COVID normal, it's going to be a real struggle for pets.
Well, they can set up Zoom meetings.
That's right.
They get together.
The cats won't give a toss. They'll be quite happy to see people leave their domains, but the poor dogs. Someone please think about the poor dogs. I certainly am.
I'm going to think about the news that's in print and online this morning. And we're joined by US-based columnist with the Australian Financial Review, Joe Aston. G'day, Joe. How are you going?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, likewise. So let's kick off with the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah, so I found this one amusing. The state government has declined to mandate the wearing of masks on public transport because 60% of public transport users are already wearing masks, according to surveys. When they actually refer to the CCTV footage of the trains and the buses and the stations, it's actually only 30%. So I don't know if you were the New South Wales government, whether or not you might maybe rely on the actual evidence as opposed to the the kind of self-identification. It's a bit like having a shoplifting survey. Are you a shoplifter? I suspect you would probably find that there is no shoplifting if that was the case. It's kind of a strange use of the data, if you ask me.
No, it's not exactly the data that you want to use as the base for serious health advice and health recommendations, is it, Joe?
No.
Now,
and there was actually only 8 or 9 days ago, there was actually transmission on a bus, on an express bus in Sydney. So
yeah, no, it's an odd one.
I suppose it's frustrating for you guys. You guys can't even get on a bus or a train in Melbourne.
we can.
They're just harder to catch, they're harder to find, and they're actually quite empty at the moment because you're right.
You can't go far.
No one's catching them. Hey, let's go to your patch. New York Times Online has all the latest on the US election campaign. Joe Biden hitting back at Donald Trump's portrayal of him as a radical socialist. I've heard lots of expressions, lots of descriptions of Joe Biden. Radical socialist, I have to say, is not one of them.
It's certainly a new designation he's copying, but. Joe Biden actually flew to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this morning, gave a speech. It's the first time he's left Delaware, with his basement strategy. It's clear that that's in response to how successful Trump's Republican convention was in tightening the polls and focusing the election kind of paradigm around law and order. He, in fact, used language like rioting is not protesting, looting is not protesting, setting fires is not protesting. This is Biden today. So he's become quite defensive, kind of strengthened his rhetoric against events in Portland, and it's clear that he's now on the back foot. And the polls show that they've tightened massively. I mean, in places like Michigan, which we've discussed before, he has to win. It's come in from 8.5% lead for Biden to a 2.5% lead, and in Wisconsin from a 6.5% lead to a 3.5% lead. So Trump is now in the polls in a far stronger position than he was at this point against Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Except this time he has the full resources of the federal government and a massive war chest that he didn't have either of those 4 years ago. So, I don't think, I think everyone was calling this as a bit of a one-horse race and a walkover a few months ago, and it is most certainly not the case anymore.
We've been proven wrong with US election campaigns before. It was interesting, Joe, watching the Republican convention, the unconventional conventions. I can see why the Republicans sort of got a bit of a bounce out of the back of it. I mean, a lot of people, even Democrats, were saying, look, they did pretty well despite the criticism of using the White House as the backdrop and having all the family lined up there with him. I mean, what's your sense of where things might go even over the next few weeks or month?
Yeah, well, that's very hard to predict, and especially in the current environment. You know, who could predict what the hell's going to happen in the world right now? But I think the virus still has the great potential to completely overwhelm whatever Trump wants his narrative to be. So if cases continue to get worse, really bad outbreaks, it really won't matter what Trump says about law and order. It will be back again about the coronavirus. So that's an X factor that you just can't predict. But it will also, I think, come down to Biden. You know, it's not just a referendum on Trump anymore. It's now Trump versus Biden, and how Biden performs is going to be very important. And I think we all know that Joe Biden is very gaffe prone, and that it's questionable whether or not he still has the same kind of powers on the campaign trail that he once had, you know, in his older age. So, you know, I think the debates are going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
Best show on earth right now.
Best show in town, and the debates with Joe Biden, much more to lose because of those very important points you just made than Donald Trump. So lots of very nervous Democrats, undoubtedly. Now, we have all these big issues, Joe, the US election being covered there by the New York Times, Sydney Morning Herald focusing on the pandemic. What's the Daily Telegraph looking at this morning?
Right, yes. Well, they're up in arms because the British Museum has attached to Indigenous artefacts, Australian Indigenous artefacts from the 18th century, the reference that Australia's has been under permanent British occupation for 200 years, 250. I personally think this is a bit of a burying of the lead. Obviously, a lot of this was in response to the defacement of Captain Cook statues and protests over Black Lives Matter in London. But what's amazing is that the British Museum, having been asked by the traditional owners to return the Guiagal Shield, have declined to. So, I mean, I think that is quite a remarkable thing. The British Museum is, of course, you know, just one enormous display case of treasure looted and stolen from conquered lands and subjugated peoples, and the fact that they are still, we all know about the Elgin marbles, but that asked by traditional owners to return their artefacts, they are declining to. And I find it hard also not to link that to the Rio Tinto destruction of the Juukan Gorge caves in May, which only last week the mostly British board of directors of Rio Tinto decided that they would not sack a single person over the obliteration of the caves, 46,000 years old, 9 times older than Stonehenge. And I can tell you, if Rio Tinto blew up Stonehenge, I would be pretty surprised if nobody lost their job. But, you know, the cultural superiority and colonialism lives and continues strongly in London.
Yes, the lack of accountability at Rio Tinto, and you've chronicled this in the Financial Review, is absolutely breathtaking, isn't it? Staggering.
Astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And they've made it clear ultimately that they do not care what Australian shareholders think, because the British shareholders are, you know, fairly dismissive of this travesty down there in Australia. And it is just an incredible tragedy because of the anthropological value of what has been destroyed. But I don't think it's over yet. I have faith in industry super funds that they will ultimately extract an outcome.
Insightful as ever. Joe Aston, thanks for joining us.
Cheers. See ya.
Thanks, Joe. Now, Northern Territory mango farmers are in limbo, waiting to hear if migrant workers critical to getting those crops picked will be allowed into the country.
The group from Vanuatu, which is coronavirus-free, by the way, will need approval from their government to travel to Australia. But the window is closing fast. Amy Colpert has this story.
It was supposed to be a lifeline for an industry desperately in need. Workers from Vanuatu chartered into the Northern Territory for jobs Australians simply couldn't fill.
No pickers, no fruit being picked, no fruit being packed, no fruit, and really devastating for business.
170 mango pickers were supposed to arrive in Darwin tomorrow, the federal government's solution to chronic labour shortages.
Without the workers to harvest the fruit, the majority of that fruit is going to be left to rot on the ground. So, yeah, this is an incredibly vital part of the equation.
But without the Vanuatu government on board, that plan is on hold leaving local growers in limbo.
We only have 5-6 weeks of the year where we have, in average, where we have an opportunity to basically earn the money that we spend all year round. So yeah, it's quite crucial.
Vanuatu is coronavirus free, with international travel locked down to keep it that way. If the group gets the green light, it will be the first seasonal workers allowed out of the country and into Australia since the pandemic struck.
Yes, I'm still hopeful that we can still get this trial going and that we can also look to other countries such as potentially Samoa and East Timor to get the workers over that we need.
The Northern Territory mango industry is worth around $120 million a year to the local economy and relies on up to 2,000 seasonal workers to pick the annual crop. Growers will have to make do with considerably less this year, but they're confident of getting the fruit to market.
Well, we will try our utmost best that we can assure that you will have mangoes and all the way through Christmas and after Christmas and get to eat a juicy mango.
A sweet result in testing times. Amy Colbert, ABC News.
And we are counting on them for it. When it comes to housing, Australians have fallen for every type, from McMansions to tiny homes. But one southern Queensland couple has gone a step further. They've lived in a converted World War II bunker for the past 30 years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Reporter Peter Gunders took a tour.
This is your average Aussie bush, but pay close attention because you might drive straight past a very not-so-average Aussie home.
I live in an abandoned underground bunker, the same as this one. It was abandoned in 1956, rebuilt in 86. It's been empty for 30 years. Can't believe it was empty for so long. But we moved into one of the bunkers and it's been a great adventure. This is where we started from, Peter. There were no doors, no vents, no nothing much, just imagination at that stage. But it's been great fun. This is the same size as the one we live in, 40 feet long, and rolls back into the hill 20 feet. Yeah, this one has obviously had hay in them. A lot of them had hay and grain stored in them when we arrived. The farmers thought it was great. OK, come on in. Home sweet home. Good to be home again. I'll put the kettle on. You got time for a cup of tea?
The bunkers were part of a little-known RAAF base near Miles in World War II, known as 3CR, and they were made from 10-inch thick concrete.
You don't want to bang your head on the wall, no giving it whatsoever. That really gave the cabinet maker, nightmares. A little curved wall, I can still fit pillow slips and things in there, not a problem. It's a good open plan. It's got bedroom, bathroom, kitchen and sitting room, and dining room, or a lounge room really, and an office, which used to be a children's bedroom, but now is an office. So a good view from up here. So I can have a garden as well up on the roof. Yeah, it's nice from up here.
The Hines love their bunker life so much that they've renovated others for visitors and they've turned their farm into a caravan park. But they've left one of the bunkers in its original condition.
It was lovely and secure, warm in winter, cool in summer, low maintenance, and it was sitting there waiting to be used, so away we went.
Peter Gunders, ABC News, Miles.
Fantastic story. Let's check your sporting news now. Good morning, PK.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. Straight to the sporting headlines. And Caleb Ewan has given Australia some joy at the Tour de France. It was stage 3 and it came down to a sprint finish, which is Caleb Ewan's specialty. And there was a strong headwind there, so he was very smart to just hold back until the last minute. He went past the former world champ Peter Sagan and then pipped the Irishman on the line, Sam Bennett, and celebrated. It's his 4th stage win. Caleb Ewan, he won 3 last year in his debut Tour de France, and so he hopes to win more during this race. Julian Alaphilippe, by the way, still in the yellow jersey. Here's Caleb Ewan.
Yeah, everyone stayed motivated. We all knew that if it all went right, then I can win the sprint. So, everyone did their job today, and I think everyone gave 110% and made up for the 2 guys that we've missed, and yeah, it worked.
The US Open has begun in New York and a couple of Aussies have been in action. Angelique Kerber has knocked out Ilya Tomljanovic from Australia. 6-4, 6-4. Kerber is the 17th seed, so Tomljanovic not able to win that one. And the world #1 player, the top seed here, Karolina Pliskova, 6-4, 4-6 love, beating Kalinina in her match. Jordan Thompson from Australia has won a 4-set match to go through to the second round as well. So the tournament will be ongoing now, barring any unforeseen circumstances. And Danny Frawley, well, his wife Anita has released a statement saying that her husband, due to a report that's been handed to the coroner, it can be said now that he had CTE, that neurological disorder, which is linked to repeated head knocks. Anita Frawley wanted to speak out now, although the coroner hasn't released the report yet, saying this is an issue for the community. We need more research to diagnose and assist people living with the disease. So we wait to hear the coroner's report there. Of course, Danny Frawley, Michael and Lisa, died in that single car crash almost a year ago.
Yeah, God, it seems like much longer than that, PK. Thank you so much. Today we're talking about masks, triggered by the really colourful and arresting mask worn by the likes of Lady Gaga at the MTV VMA Awards overnight. She had one at one stage which looked like a huge gas mask. There was this one. She had a different mask, didn't she, Lisa, for different
every
performances?
Costume, a lot of effort into those masks, and I've seen quite a few of them around the place, actually. It's nice because, you know, look, they're not compulsory in Queensland and New South Wales yet, but they're certainly recommended, and you can get a little bit creative.
We have quite a few of our viewers chipping in already. Pete and John in Byron Bay sent us this pic. Beautiful. Which one do you like? I'm not sure which one's Pete, which one's John. I like the guy on the right. Yeah, that mask.
And Charles and Nicole in Tamworth. So 2 weeks ago, my partner Nicole, Charles, wrote into us, commenced chemotherapy to treat breast cancer. And so our theme is rainbows and joy. And we've got these face masks made with our nicknames embroidered. Good luck with the treatment, Nicole.
All the best, Nicole. And Matt Yarnold sent this in. He says, simply, I needed reminding that love is real.
Nice
Thank you, Matt.
Of course, there was Bob Catter's crocodile mask. We can't avoid that one. Lots of teeth along the side.
And a whole lot more. We'll get to some more masks in the next hour. But Nate, what's happening on the weather front?
Well, I was going to talk about masks briefly, actually.
Yes.
Did you clock the one that Claire, our makeup artist, was using this morning?
A cat.
Cat. I'll see if I can get a
photo, please.
Yeah, right. I'll see if I can get a photo in the break. But I want to show you a gorgeous picture from the end of winter, but the start of spring as well, from WA. Colin sent this one to the Weather Obsessed Facebook group. Anything more WA than a black swan, especially with some gorgeous little babies right behind it. But I tell you what, WA not looking at a completely great start to spring, because we've got heat being drawn down from the north into the southeast of the state. Gusty, hot northerly winds, and they're ramping up the fire danger with catastrophic conditions on for the south interior and for the Euclid district. Total fire bans right through the southeast of WA. We'll take you there later on in the show. Perth's got a few showers around 16 degrees. That's behind the front, whereas ahead of it, see things warming up, 20 in Adelaide. Most of the capital staying fine today, and Darwin's got another hot one, 35 degrees.
Terrific. Thank you. Lots coming up in the next hour. We've got Annabelle Crabb we're chatting to later in the program, and we're going to speak to the Trade and Tourism Minister about the detention of this Australian in China. Stick with us.
We'll be here to care for you.
Few sports stars have captivated Australia the way sprinter Cathy Freeman has.
This is an Olympic finals night. You can
absolutely tasted in the air.
The Australian people want an apology for the injustices of the past.
The event you're about to see, they're calling the race of our lives.
This is my step towards the future now.
That was a gift. She gave us all a gift.
This time-travelling family are living in the past.
I've got a key. It's 1900.
It's different.
How are you at wood chopping?
Milking a cow is so gross.
The food is my biggest worry.
It's looking at me.
In 2020, our children are quite sheltered.
I miss my showers.
I want to know when I get time off.
1970s.
Immerse yourself in history.
How bad can it be?
Further Back in Time for Dinner starts tonight 8:30 on ABC and iView.
A high-profile Australian TV anchor at a Chinese state broadcaster detained in Beijing.
The road out of lockdown, Victoria's traffic light plan to reopen closed businesses.
Gladys Berejiklian expected to announce permit changes during a visit to the New South Wales-Victoria border.
Australia's spy boss warns not all Australians are the good guys as she defends surveillance of citizens.
Multiple fires reported at a Brisbane prison under coronavirus lockdown.
And we get our daily dose of cuteness from some of the newest arrivals at a Tassie wildlife sanctuary. And welcome back this Tuesday morning. You're watching News Breakfast. Great to have your company. An Australian journalist working in China has been detained by the Chinese government in a highly sensitive case, posing a fresh challenge to those already fraught Australia-China relations. Cheng Lei is an anchor for the Chinese government's English language TV network, CGTN. Friends and family have been unable to contact her for weeks, and the Foreign Affairs Department has now confirmed that she is being detained in Beijing.
Cheng Lei hasn't been formally arrested or charged and could be kept for up to 6 months without access to lawyers. It provides another pressure point in the deteriorating relationship between Australia and China. We'll speak to Trade and Tourism Minister Simon Birmingham in just a moment, but first to the rest of the day's news.
And trade tensions have intensified with China following news of a second investigation into Australian wine exports. It comes on the same day. Australian woman Cheng Lei, as we have just mentioned, a journalist working in China, has been detained by local authorities. Trade and Tourism Minister Simon Birmingham joins us now from Parliament House.
Good morning, Minister. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Look, what can you tell us about Cheng Lei?
Well, the Australian government was notified through our embassy of her detention on the 14th of August. We had consular access via video link on the 27th of August and continue to provide appropriately consular assistance to Ms Cheng Lei. We equally are working with her family, who have issued a statement acknowledging that they will respect the process and urging for people to respect their privacy and limit comment at this time.
Do we know why she's been detained?
We're working through details in terms of the consular assistance that we can provide, and we will give all assistance that we can. Obviously, this is a concerning time for her family, and that's why we will continue to provide every bit of assistance that we can within the usual consular terms.
What is going on with the relationship with China?
There are clearly a number of issues. This is a vast and complex relationship. It's also an important one to Australia at a range of different levels. And our desire is to see that Australia and China can continue to work wherever we can in a cooperative manner. Now, there are obviously some issues of difficulty that arise from time to time. They have always arisen. There have long been different and difficult consular cases that exist in the Chinese relationship. There have always been other points of tension, be they on human rights or other matters, but we continue to be committed to working as closely as we can, and particularly in the areas of mutual interest and advantage for our two nations.
It does seem to be one thing after another, though, Minister, and in the Financial Review this morning, the Chinese Foreign Ministry is quoted as saying that Australia is responsible for the current tense situation and whoever started the trouble should end it. Is that how you see it?
Well, I certainly wouldn't accept that sort of characterisation. Australia has continued to engage with China. We have continued to seek to have discussions, from leader-level discussions that have occurred annually and routinely, through to the discussions that I've sought to have, and I'm disappointed that the Chinese authorities have not agreed to have those sorts of minister-to-minister discussions. We continue to support engagement at a range of different levels of cooperation and stand ready and willing to do so. Now, we're very protective of Australia's values, of our interests, of our security, as any nation is, any nation including China. But we don't seek to change those in relation to China. We simply seek to protect our own and seek then to engage with all of our partners across the region, respectful of the sovereignty of different nations and simply expecting that same respect to be reciprocated towards Australia.
Yeah, there's another important report that's out today from the think tank ASPI, and they've suggested that this coercive diplomacy is certainly on the rise and there's a heightened risk of doing business in China. I mean, what hope can you give Australian businesses when we've seen beef, barley, wine, now we've got the detention of an Australian with huge question marks over where this relationship is going, and you can't even get a phone call?
So the report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute is an important reminder that we're not the only country in the world having these conversations at present, and that we face many challenges not dissimilar to those being faced right around the globe, including in the European Union and elsewhere. Now, I've said publicly before that the decisions we've seen on a number of trade policy fronts this year by China would, for any business, change the risk profile when you are looking at doing business in China, because when you do see a heightened level of unexpected and seemingly arbitrary policy decisions taken, then that heightens that risk profile. We continue to have very strong trade, very strong flows of trade in both directions, and I hope that that does continue, and we will do all we can to support our businesses through some of the issues, including the erroneous anti-dumping claims that have been made, to make sure we put the strongest possible case in defence of those. But clearly it is for individual businesses to assess how that risk profile has changed, and that's why we equally work as hard as we can to open up new trade opportunities for different Australian exporters and businesses, whether that be through our recent trade deal with Indonesia that entered into force in July, our negotiations with the European Union, or our strategy of economic engagement with India. These are all the types of things we do to provide more choices for businesses who make a decision to diversify their risk.
Yes, none of that compares, though, to the Chinese market, you've got to admit. But look, let's come back to the domestic front, because Dan Andrews has said that on Sunday he will release the plans of this roadmap. What do you want to see as Trade and Tourism Minister? What do you think needs to be in this roadmap? What do we need to know on Sunday?
Well, Dan Andrews needs to provide hope to Victorians and a clear plan for how, as they continually work to suppress this second surge of COVID-19 that Victoria has dealt with, but as they continually suppress that, what is the pathway out? Now, ahead of his roadmap on Sunday, we have the National Cabinet deliberations on Friday, where I would urge all state and territory leaders to engage constructively with discussions around how we can embrace and use hotspot zones as a way to keep communities safe, but also a way to open up border and travel across this country. We have many, many thousands of jobs being lost across our travel and tourism industries at present, and we will only see more of them lost if borders are kept in place in an arbitrary manner rather than embracing evidence and using an evidence-based hotspots approach to define how border restrictions and controls can be implemented into the future. And I hope that all state and territory premiers will come willing to embrace evidence, look at how those policies can be enacted, and make sure that we can save as many jobs across Australia, as well as, of course, make life easier, particularly for those in cross-border communities.
Yeah, it's gearing up to be a critical meeting on Friday. Thanks for your time this morning, Minister.
Thank you, my pleasure.
As we were just discussing, Victorians will learn on Sunday the details of this plan to ease COVID-19 restrictions following what's been a 6-week stage 4 lockdown. Premier Daniel Andrews says a reopening roadmap will cover industries forced to close during the lockdown, including cafes, restaurants and retailers. A traffic light system will explain varying levels of restrictions according to risk. State Parliament will sit again today, with Upper House MPs expected to vote on an extension of the state of emergency powers.
Gladys Berejiklian will visit Albury on the New South Wales-Victorian border today, announcing details of a so-called border bubble. The ABC understands the Premier will announce a single border region will be reinstated on Friday, extending 50 kilometres either side of the state boundary. Currently, Victorian border residents with permits to enter New South Wales must stay within a 2.5 kilometre zone. New resident permits will also come into effect from Friday.
A number of fires have broken out at the Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre in Brisbane's west, which is in stage 4 lockdown due to coronavirus. Emergency services were called to the prison just after 9 o'clock last night. Crews extinguished what they describe as a small rubbish fire. Queensland Corrective Services has confirmed multiple fires occurred inside the facility yesterday and last night, but say no one was injured.
We found some external fire on the grass, which were extinguished. There was also some internal combustible material that was on fire. Crews went into action to extinguish those fires.
Australia's Foreign Cyber Intelligence Agency will today defend its right to spy on Australians engaging in terrorism or espionage. In a rare speech, the head of the Australian Signals Directorate, Rachel Noble, will offer a detailed history of the organisation and defend its need for secrecy. She'll warn that Australia is facing challenging circumstances and a near impossible task of defeating both terrorism and espionage. She says there are strict protections and restrictions in place if the agency wants to spy on Australians rather than foreigners.
The relatives of those killed when Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was shot down over Ukraine in 2014 are seeking damages from 4 men standing trial in the Netherlands. So far, 316 family members have confirmed that they are seeking unspecified financial damages from 3 Russians and a Ukrainian who are still at large. 298 people died, including 38 Australians, when the Malaysia Airlines plane was shot down by a Russian surface-to-air missile.
Coronavirus and calls for racial justice have taken centre stage at MTV's Socially Distanced Video Music Awards. The first major award ceremony of the pandemic has been held without an audience and with most performances pre-recorded. Canadian artist The Weeknd took out the top prize for Video of the Year, dedicating his award to police shooting victims Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor. But Lady Gaga dominated the awards with 4 VMAs, a show-stopping performance and multiple costume changes with custom-designed masks to match.
Stay safe, speak your mind, and I might sound like a broken record, but wear a mask. It's a sign of respect.
Let's see what the markets are doing. The Aussie futures down 59 points after a slower day on the Dow. The Aussie dollar 73.8 US cents. Tapis crude up slightly and gold up just almost $3 an ounce.
Let's go to sport now. Australia has tasted early success in the Tour de France with Caleb Ewan winning stage 3 in a thrilling finish. The 26-year-old New South Welshman blitzed the peloton as the famous race ran from Nice to Sisteron. Frenchman Julien Alipe remains in the yellow jersey. Let's check your weather now. Good morning, Nate.
Happy spring, Michael and Lisa. We've not got a great start to the week in the southwest of the country. In fact, we've got a front moving through that's drawing down